For the first time in over 30 years, Birmingham City will be playing third-tier football next season. Birmingham have won a major trophy more recently than Tottenham, Newcastle, and even their bitter rivals Aston Villa, who qualified for the Champions League this season. But in the same season that the Blues beat Arsenal 2-1 at Wembley Stadium to lift the 2011 League Cup and qualify for the Europa League, they also suffered relegation from the Premier League. Following 13 years in the Championship, Birmingham finally got out of it this season, but not in the direction that they would have liked. 11 games into the campaign, Birmingham was 6th in the Championship, inside the playoff places, following back-to-back wins. It was a 3-1 win at home against West Brom, which lifted Birmingham into the playoffs. After the game, Birmingham City boss John Eustace described the performance as being, quote, "just what my Birmingham City team is all about," going on to thank Birmingham fans for their support of him and the team. Little did he know at the time that he was giving his last press conference as manager of the club. 3 days after that win, and just 1 day after Wayne Rooney had mutually parted ways with MLS side DC United, Birmingham sacked Eustace and appointed Manchester United's all-time leading goalscorer on a 3.5-year deal. It was sold as being an ambitious long-term appointment, a big-name manager to go alongside a big-name investor following Tom Brady's acquisition of a minority stake in the club. A club statement said that Eustace wasn't, quote, "fully aligned on the importance of implementing a winning mentality and a culture of ambition across the entire football club," end quote. Playing safe is mediocrity, stated Birmingham City CEO Gary Cook, who was brought in by Birmingham's American owners following 6 months as the CEO of the Saudi Pro League. Rooney, by contrast, promised no-fear football, according to another club statement, which described Rooney's appointment as, quote, "a defining moment for the football club." It was certainly a defining moment in Birmingham's season. The Blues proceeded to win just 2 of Rooney's 15 games in charge, and 86 days into his 1,350-day contract, the England and Manchester United legend was sacked. The combined efforts of Tony Mowbray, who was sadly taken ill just 5 weeks after replacing Rooney, Mark Venus and Gary Rowett couldn't steer Birmingham clear of the drop, and on the final day of the season, Birmingham City were relegated. It all sounds like a bit of a disaster, and in some ways it is. And yet, if you speak to most Birmingham City fans, they'll tell you that they're in great spirits and feel very positive about their new owners. In fact, a lot of Blues fans under the age of 30 or 35 will tell you there has never been a better time to support the club. From the outside looking in, where all most can see is a brainless sacking, an ill-judged appointment, and relegation to a division that Birmingham haven't played in for over 3 decades, it all seems a bit bizarre. So just what on earth is going on? Is there really reason for Birmingham City fans to celebrate, despite just getting relegated? Or has someone spiked the water in England's second city with acid?
¿Por qué no los dos?
Well, that's what today's video is all about. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to the second largest city in the United Kingdom as we take a look at Birmingham City's turbulent and deeply troubled recent past, their former and current owners, and why they are at their most positive in decades, having just been relegated. Birmingham City are one of the oldest football clubs in England. Founded in 1875 as Small Heath Alliance, they were founding members and the first champions of the second division. Birmingham spent most of the 1920s through to the 1960s in the top flight, reaching the FA Cup final in 1931 and again in 1956, but losing on both occasions, before claiming their first piece of silverware in 1963, when they overcame local rivals Aston Villa over 2 legs, in only the 3rd edition of the Football League Cup. In 1989, Birmingham dropped into the 3rd division for the first time in their history and were acquired by Manchester-based brothers Ramesh Bimal and Samesh Kumar via their clothing company BRS Kumar. The Kumar brothers burnt through 5 different managers over the next 3 years, which might be the norm in the modern game, but was still fairly unusual at the time. The 1990-91 season heralded Birmingham's lowest ever league finish, 12th in the 3rd division, with a trophy at Wembley in the Associate Members' Cup only providing very slight consolation. Things got so bad at the beginning of the 1990s that Birmingham's players collectively threatened not to renew their contracts, and though the Blues returned to the second division in 1992, within months, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International's collapse sent the Kumar brothers' business into receivership. Despite the brothers refusing to resign from the Birmingham City board, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International's receivers soon put their 84% stake in the club up for sale. Birmingham went into administration then, and they stayed there for months until, in 1993, David Sullivan bought the club, with another set of brothers, David and Ralph Gold, investing alongside him. Sullivan paid a reported £1.2 million for 80% of Birmingham City, and immediately made a further £500,000 available to spend on new players. It might sound like chicken feed to some of you now, but at the time, especially for a club that had been in administration for the last few months, it was serious investment, which even earned Sullivan comparisons with Blackburn owner Jack Walker. Unlike Walker, Sullivan wasn't a lifelong Birmingham City fan though, and this wasn't a passion project for him and Gold, but a business investment. Sullivan's first move was to appoint Karen Brady as Birmingham's managing director. It made Brady the first female chief executive in English football history, and, at the age of 23, also the youngest. Brady knew Sullivan through their father, Terry Brady, a successful businessman and the former chairman of Swindon Town. When Brady began working as an account executive for the broadcaster LBC, she reached out to Sullivan, who spent more than £2 million on advertising over the next 6 months, before asking Brady to come and work for him. Sullivan and Gold themselves, meanwhile, made their fortunes in what we will describe, for YouTube demonetization purposes, as the adult entertainment industry. Adult movies, magazines and shops had made Sullivan a millionaire by the age of 25, and by the late 1970s, Sullivan and the Gold brothers dominated Britain's illicit magazine market. There is a reason, after all, why Sporting Club de Portugal's president labelled Sullivan and Gold the Dildo Brothers over the William Carvalho transfer saga back in 2017. Birmingham didn't become the next Blackburn. In fact, they were actually relegated to the third tier again, a year before Walker's Blackburn team lifted the Premier League title, but slowly but surely, they began to get some things right. Sullivan rebuilt much of St Andrews, bringing it into the modern post-Taylor Report era, and Birmingham's spending reflected his ambition. Big signings were made, whether that be Steve Claridge or Kevin Francis, but even bigger ones were promised. The Blues were linked with the likes of Ballon d'Or winner Jean-Pierre Papin, Sweden star Kenneth Anderson, and even the great Diego Maradona during Sullivan and Gold's time at the club, conspicuously, always seemingly around the time that season tickets just so happened to be up for renewal, and none of which ever materialised. In fact, ticket pricing, and the sense that they were being fleeced, became the biggest critique among Birmingham fans of their owners. Even in 2002, when the Blues made a long-awaited return to the top flight, entering the league for the first time since its Premier League rebrand, a sudden hike in already relatively high ticket prices took the gloss off what ought to have been a simply joyous occasion. Managing director Karen Brady, who is now a Conservative life peer in the House of Lords, liked to boast about Birmingham's impressive revenue growth, but it was growth which came largely at the expense of the club's own supporters. Gold and Sullivan certainly brought stability though, and in July 2005, Chairman David Gold stated that it was time to, quote, start talking about being as good as anyone outside of the top 3 or 4, with, quote, the best squad of players for 25 years. The following season, Birmingham were relegated. Even after tasting Premier League relegation though, Birmingham made an immediate return to the top flight under Steve Bruce. By this stage, however, the Premier League was becoming a seriously expensive business as foreign cash, most notably in the form of Roman Abramovich, began flooding into the league. As Sullivan put it, he wasn't about to spend his children's inheritance on Birmingham City Football Club. When Birmingham missed out on a UK government proposal to build a so-called super casino, which Sullivan hoped would form part of a sporting village, with a new 60,000-seater stadium at the heart of it, funded by the state and local government, he basically lost interest in the club and put it up for sale. Sullivan's last promise to the Birmingham fans, that he would at least make sure that whoever bought the club would be a safe pair of hands, couldn't have been any further from the truth. In the summer of 2007, Hong Kong-based businessman Carson Yeung acquired a 29.9% stake in Birmingham with a view to a full ownership over the next few months. Young was a barber turned entrepreneur, no seriously, who lived in a $51 million mansion in Hong Kong, travelled in a $750,000 Maybach, and owned an 88-foot luxury yacht. A self-described billionaire, Young claimed to have amassed his fortune initially through his chain of barbershops and hairdressers, and then through stock market investments and casino winnings. Young was an avid gambler in the former Portuguese colony of Macau who, ironically enough, was probably just as gutted as Sullivan was at Birmingham missing out on a super casino, albeit for rather different reasons. Young paid £15 million for his initial stake in Birmingham, giving up on his role as chairman of the Hong Kong Rangers in the process, where he had developed a reputation for interfering with team selection and on-field decisions, much to the annoyance of Hong Kong Rangers managers. Young's involvement was supposed to herald fresh investment in the team, and some money was spent, but there was immediate suspicion as to whether Young was really as rich as he claimed he was when he was unable to produce the necessary funds to complete a full takeover. The uncertainty surrounding Birmingham's ownership, combined with constant speculation as to whether Young would keep him on if or when a full takeover finally happened, led to Steve Bruce quitting midway through Young's first season in charge and taking a job with Premier League rivals Wigan Athletic instead. Alex McLeish resigned from his role as manager of Scotland's national team to replace Bruce, but Birmingham were relegated in 19th place, with Derby County, literally the worst team in Premier League history, the only team to finish below them. Birmingham fans blamed Young for relegation, what with it being his fault and all, but smart use of the loan market and the signing of Kevin Phillips ensured another swift return to the top flight under McLeish, and in the summer of 2009, Young finally agreed upon a full takeover, paying £57 million for Birmingham's outstanding shares, valuing the club at over £80 million, and promising to invest a further £50 million in the playing squad. Unlike with a lot of owners who arrive with much promise and excitement before delivering inevitable crushing disappointment, Young skipped out on the middle bit. By the time that he completed his takeover of Birmingham, most of the club supporters were already deeply suspicious of him. His full takeover didn't receive the green light until October, after the transfer window had closed, causing an agreed £5 million deal for Turkish midfielder Tuncay to fall through, but Birmingham had still spent fairly heavily following promotion. Roger Johnson and Scott Dan formed a brand new centre-back pairing, Lee Bowyer brought some much-needed Premier League nous to the Blues midfield, and the late Christian Benitez, aka Chucho, was supposed to be a bit of a wild card up front. Perhaps Birmingham's most significant signing of all, though, was actually Joe Hart, who arrived on loan from Manchester City and was magnificent in his time at St Andrews. Birmingham finished 9th, their highest league finish since the 1950s, which earned Young some goodwill from supporters, but even the 2009-10 season didn't pass without scandal. It was widely reported when Young bought Birmingham that David Gold would be retained as the club's chairman, but after the takeover was ratified, Young named a new board, appointing himself as president, Michael Wiseman as vice president, Vico Hu as chairman, Sammy Yu and Peter Panu as vice chairman, and Michael Dunford as chief executive. Gold was furious, and after he and Sullivan bought West Ham, fulfilling Sullivan's dream of owning a club with a taxpayer-funded super stadium, Gold published a statement in which he branded Birmingham's new chairman, Peter Panu, as disgusting. Birmingham responded by banning Gold from St Andrews ahead of West Ham's visit to the stadium, and even David Sullivan conceded that his business partner had perhaps gone a little bit too far. Panu went further than that, accusing Gold of lying and hinting at the prospect of legal action, with reports that Birmingham might share sensitive financial documents from Gold and Sullivan's time at the club, which could potentially torpedo West Ham's long-term hopes to move into the Olympic Stadium. Gold subsequently issued a rather swift apology to Panu on West Ham's official website, which has since been taken down. The following season was an absolute whirlwind for Birmingham. Beating Arsenal at Wembley, thanks to an 89th minute winner from Obafemi Martins in the League Cup final, is arguably the club's greatest ever moment. Not only did it secure only Birmingham's second ever major trophy, and their first in almost 50 years, it also booked them a place in the Europa League. Either side of beating Arsenal, though, Birmingham lost back-to-back home league games against Everton and Newcastle, and the threat of relegation loomed large. After winning the League Cup, Birmingham's form totally collapsed. They won just 2 of their last 13 games, a run of form which would have seen most managers sacked, but there too, Birmingham had a big problem. The club's parent company, initially known as Grand Top International, before being renamed Birmingham International Holdings and later Birmingham Sports Holdings, declared that it had debts in excess of £29 million. Yeung was forced to put his own properties up as collateral in order to secure a loan, and Birmingham announced that they were looking for new investors in a desperate attempt to raise funds. 2 share offerings by Birmingham International Holdings were supposed to raise more than £24 million. The first listing of 450 million shares, underwritten by the East Asian brokerage firm Kingston, raised £7.15 million as expected. But the second, much larger listing of 1.1 billion shares, which wasn't underwritten by anyone, failed to raise a promised £17.5 million, leaving a pretty significant funding gap. At this point, it is probably just worth noting that Birmingham were never wholly, or solely at least, owned by Carson Yeung. They were owned by Birmingham International Holdings, or whatever it happened to be named at any specific time, which Yeung owned between 20 to 25% of, making him the company's largest individual shareholder. This was convenient for Yeung, in some ways, since it meant that he didn't exceed the threshold which requires an individual to pass a fit and proper owner's test. If this seems like mere pedantry or some kind of minor clarification, I can assure you that it isn't, for reasons that will very soon become clear. Yeung routinely traded BIH shares and made loans of up to £19 million to Birmingham, so money and shares were changing hands fairly fluidly, but there was little sign of any significant external or third-party investment, which the club so badly needed. While Yeung's fundraising efforts stalled, Birmingham's wage bill ballooned. Serbian giant Nikola Zigic's 4-year contract alone was thought to be worth in excess of £10 million, on top of the £6 million that Birmingham paid to sign him. The likes of Ben Foster, Curtis Davies, and loan deals for David Bentley, Alexander Haleb, and Obafemi Martins also didn't come cheap. It put Birmingham in a perilous financial situation, and that was before they were relegated, resulting in at least a £25 million shortfall on the revenue that they had accounted for the following season. The situation was so bad that Birmingham reportedly couldn't afford to sack McLeish, which would have cost around £2 million, even when their form fell off a cliff, and they were ultimately relieved when he chose to voluntarily quit. It also threatened to scupper their hard-earned Europa League aspirations, as UEFA and the Premier League sought assurances regarding the club's finances before allowing them to compete. Over the summer, following relegation, Birmingham overhauled their squad, raising almost £30 million in player sales and looking to offload any of their high earners who had suitors, and doing just about enough to be allowed to compete in Europe. Soon, however, European football would be the least of the club's concerns. That's because, over the exact same summer, Carson Yeung was arrested in Hong Kong and charged with money laundering. The BIH offices were raided and documents were seized by the authorities. At this point, Birmingham City fans were wondering whether the club had any future at all. Yeung sought to reassure supporters, paying an almost $1 million bail in order to be granted permission to fly to England, and claiming that his own personal legal situation would have no impact upon the club, their day-to-day operations, or finances. Those words, like most things that Yeung said, rang hollow. Yeung's money laundering charges totaled some £59 million, but while he was busy assembling a legal team, Alex McLeish's replacement Chris Hughton managed to assemble a half-decent football team, despite the fire sale, cobbled together by free agents and loanees like Jonathan Spector, Chris Wood, Boaz Myhill and Marlon King. Against all of the odds, Birmingham battled to a 4th place finish under Hughton, making the playoffs, where they lost against Blackpool in the semi-finals. They were also the only second-tier team to qualify for the group stage of the Europa League across the entire continent, where they beat Maribor and Club Brugge and were unfortunate not to make the knockout rounds, finishing just 1 point off the top of their tightly congested group. At the end of the season, though, following playoff heartbreak, Birmingham missed a 4th successive deadline to publish their financial accounts for the 2010-11 season and were put under a transfer embargo by the Football League. Chris Hughton leapt at the chance to escape the chaos when Premier League Norwich City came calling, and he was replaced by Huddersfield Town boss Lee Clark. At the same time, a man named Yang Jute, who's British Virgin Islands-based Incata Group Limited, had invested £6.2 million in Birmingham in 2011, and former Liverpool, Real Madrid and England winger Steve McManaman resigned from their roles at the club as executive directors. It would be fair to say that things weren't going great. Clark managed to guide Birmingham to a creditable 12th place finish, in the circumstances, but the following season, repeated fire sales, most recently losing star men Curtis Davies and Nathan Redmond, and replacing them with loanees and free agents, finally caught up with them. From January onwards, Birmingham never climbed higher than 14th. Midway through the season, Carson Yeung stepped down from all football positions at Birmingham during his trial, which concluded in March 2014. Yeung was found guilty on 5 counts of money laundering and sentenced to serve 6 years in prison. Following 5 losses on the bounce, only a 93rd minute equaliser by Paul Caddis away at Bolton Wanderers on the final day of the season managed to keep Birmingham in the Championship on goal difference. Over the next 2 and a bit years, despite the chaos off the pitch, former Blue Gary Rowett, who played for Birmingham under Golden Sullivan, managed to bring a sense of calm and stability. An end to the transfer embargo helped, of course, and successive 10th place finishes felt like a huge achievement compared to the near miss of 2014. In October 2016, however, the investment firm Trillion Trophy Asia, fronted by Paul Suen Cho Hung, a Chinese businessman educated in Australia, who is the chairman of Enviro Energy International Holdings and is worth an estimated £440 million, bought 60.78% of Birmingham International Holdings Limited's shares, relisting the company on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. That meant that Trillion Trophy Asia, and by extension, Paul Suen, were now in charge of Birmingham City, with Yeung's shareholding reduced to around 6%. Suen and TTA, foreshadowing more recent events at Birmingham, wanted to make their mark as Birmingham's new controlling shareholders and send out a statement of intent. They did so by sacking Gary Rowett, who was widely perceived as having done a very good job, and replacing him with former Watford boss Gianfranco Zola. Undoubtedly, Zola had a bigger profile from his playing days, but he had been sacked from his last job at Al Arabi in the Qatar Stars League, having only won 10 of his 26 games in charge. That was still much better than he got on in Birmingham, where he won just 2 of his 24 games in charge, giving him an 8.33% win percentage, which, and there is really no other way of putting this, is really, really bad. Zola was replaced by Harry Redknapp, and Birmingham just about managed to survive. But Suen and TTA had spent some serious cash, close to £10 million, as well as massively increasing the club's wage bill, and in return, the team had performed significantly worse. This was to cause the Blues major headaches further down the line. In the 2018-19 season, most notably, Birmingham were docked 9 points for breaching the EFL's PSR, or Profit and Sustainability Regulations, though they still managed to survive thanks to Shea Adams scoring 22 goals. I talked about Birmingham's managerial turnover under the Kumar brothers right at the beginning of this video, but the situation in recent years has been even more tumultuous and volatile. Including interim managers, Birmingham have had 20 different managers or head coaches since 2014. That is a change of management once every 6 months, on average, over an entire decade. Now, I'm not saying that's a lot or anything, but it is more than Watford have had during that time. Following the overspending when Suen and TTA arrived, resulting in the PSR breach, points deduction, and very nearly relegation, Birmingham's owners scaled back their investment, and when I say Birmingham's owners, unfortunately, that is a pretty ambiguous term. You see, post-2016 and particularly post-2020, figuring out who actually owned Birmingham City was easier said than done. Just ask Daniel Ivory, a Birmingham City fan who dedicated a lot of time and effort to trying to answer that very question, rarely finding any easy answers. We know that in October 2016, Paul Suen, via Trillion Trophy Asia, bought more than half of Birmingham International Holdings Limited, and by extension, more than half of Birmingham City Football Club, significantly reducing imprisoned former owner Carson Yeung's stake and changing the holding company's name to Birmingham Sports Holdings in 2017. In December 2020, 21.46% of the club was acquired by Oriental Rainbow Investments, another company based in the British Virgin Islands, which is 100% owned and operated by Vong Peack, a Cambodian businessman who was born in China's Shandong province. Peck's Oriental Rainbow investment firm also bought a 25% stake in Birmingham City Stadium, a company that was founded to buy St Andrews and lease it back to Birmingham City, which was a popular, if rather dubious, means of raising funds and avoiding further PSR breaches among EFL clubs for a number of years. Between Peck's two investments, across two companies, in 2020, he became Birmingham City's largest individual shareholder, though still without an overall majority. Birmingham Sports Holdings still owns 75% of the football club, but that reduced Suen and Trillion Trophy Asia's ownership to about 21%, almost half of Peck's. Elsewhere, Lee Soo-tong, a man about whom almost nothing is known, other than that he owns another company based in the British Virgin Islands, which accepted shares in Birmingham City as payment for unpaid loans that they had made to the club. Soo-tong's company, amusingly named Dragon Villa, given that Villa are, of course, Birmingham's most bitter rivals, was named in the release of the Panama Papers. In that release, Peggy Chung Bei and Wang Li-hai were listed as former shareholders in Dragon Villa, the latter of whom, Wang Li-hai, sometimes stylized as Wang Yu-hai in English and nicknamed Mr. King, didn't officially have any stake in Birmingham, but his rumoured influence was significant enough to prompt an EFL investigation into whether he was helping to run the club without declaring beneficial ownership. In the same month that Peck replaced Suen as the largest individual shareholder at Birmingham, corrosion was found in the steelwork of the Cop and Tilton Road stands at St Andrews, forcing them to be shut down. As if that wasn't bad enough, severe asbestos damage was subsequently identified in both stands. The stand closures reduced the capacity of St Andrews by more than a third, from 29,404 down to about 19,000, and it seemed to be emblematic of the general sense of neglect and decline which engulfed the whole club. Whereas Suen overspent in his first summer in charge, with little reward, Peck slammed on the spending brakes, even after selling Birmingham Academy graduate Jude Bellingham for €30 million to Borussia Dortmund. Birmingham flirted with relegation in each of Peck's 3 seasons as a prominent figure at St Andrews, and the club was viewed as being up for sale throughout most of this period. Infamous football clown Lawrence Bassini tried to buy the club in November 2021 for £27 million, having tried and failed already to buy Bolton and Charlton, and in 2022, a consortium headed by the businessman Paul Richardson, a lifelong Birmingham fan who sat on the Birmingham Board of Directors in the early 2000s, and Maxi Lopez, a retired footballer who is probably most famous for his love triangle with Mauro Icardi and the model Wanda Nara, tried to buy Birmingham for £35 million. It was reported that Richardson and Lopez's consortium had poured £8 million into Birmingham before their takeover attempt ultimately collapsed. Following those 2 failed attempts, in July 2023, at long last, Birmingham City got new owners, becoming the latest in a very, very long line of English football clubs to be acquired by American asset management companies. Knighthead Capital Management, an investment advisory firm based in New York, founded a UK subsidiary called Shelby Companies Limited. Yes, Shelby based on the fictional Shelby crime family in the television show Peaky Blinders, from which Birmingham is now seemingly forever tied, acquiring 45.98% of Birmingham City Football Club with a view to a full takeover attempt. Tom Wagner, one of Knighthead Capital Management's co-founders and serving co-chairman, became Birmingham City's new chairman. Meanwhile, Tom Brady, a retired athlete who previously played a sport that is popular in America, became the face of the takeover in some respects, with the club using his name and profile particularly prominently on social media. Again, this isn't unusual when faceless, in any meaningful sense, US investment vehicles buy football clubs. They often like to bring a more recognisable and brand-friendly looking face on board. there is Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas at Leeds United, JJ Watt at Burnley, and LeBron James at Liverpool, all of whom have very minor shareholdings. Brady, for all of the noise and the mural of him that has rather strangely popped up in the club's shop, only actually owns a 3.3% stake in Birmingham City and has no voting rights. Whereas from the outside looking in, all that most people see is a club that has been in the Championship for the last 13 years and was previously in the Premier League getting relegated in their first season under new ownership, and all of that is obviously true. To understand why Birmingham City fans are so upbeat, you have to understand everything that preceded Knighthead, Shelby Companies and Wagner's arrival, and what they have done since they came in, particularly off the pitch. St Andrews has undergone major renovation since Knighthead arrived, not just receiving a fresh lick of paint and a much needed facelift, which has immeasurably improved the aesthetic of the stadium's exterior, but also substantive refurbishments, reopening both the Cop and Tilton Road stands, getting St Andrews back to its full capacity, overhauling the hospitality bars, and making them much more appealing to the particularly lucrative prawn sandwich brigade, and building a fan park which has proved popular with supporters to spend time in both before and after games. Overall, it is estimated that Birmingham's new owners have already spent somewhere in the region of £30 million on infrastructure projects across both the club's stadium and training ground. Birmingham's West Hills training ground was badly damaged in a fire in March 2023, forcing the club to relocate to a facility that was previously used by the Wasps Rugby Football Club. Knighthead have said that they expect to spend a further £15 million redeveloping St Andrews and the training ground, despite the fact that they intend to move into a new stadium and training facilities within the next 5 years. Birmingham is the second largest city in England, but whereas London and Manchester have 7 stadiums with capacities in excess of 50,000, Villa Park, capacity 42,530, is the largest stadium in the West Midlands. Wagner intends to put that right, as he sees it, and last month, they acquired a 48-acre site in Bawdsley Park from Birmingham City Council, where the new ownership plans to build not just a new state-of-the-art stadium, but what they are describing as a sports quarter. That would include training facilities for Birmingham City's men's, women's, and junior teams, hotels, restaurants, and other businesses. At the heart of the complex would be what Wagner describes as a world-class stadium, with between 40 to 62,000 seats, which would really be more of a multi-purpose venue, designed to attract NFL games and major concerts, among other things, not dissimilar to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. The elephant in the room with all of this, of course, is the fact that Birmingham City have just been relegated to League One. Wagner previously stated that Knighthead wouldn't have bought Birmingham City had they been relegated the season before they arrived, but now they have been relegated, on Knighthead's watch, he frames it as just a bump in the road. Birmingham's average attendance last season, despite their struggles on the pitch, was 21,195, up 27% on the previous season, and the day that they were relegated, there were 27,680 fans inside of St Andrews, one of the biggest attendances on the final weekend of the Championship season. Knighthead have put on several discounted offers for big games in order to fill the stadium this season, in the hope that new or returning supporters will catch the blues bug and come back. Increased attendances have resulted in increased revenue, as have several lucrative commercial deals, most notably with the American fashion brand Undefeated, who have launched their own range of Birmingham City merchandise. A hoodie costs £125. Karen Brady would be proud of pricing like that, but that's what asset management firms are all about. According to Birmingham, had they survived this season, they would have the highest revenue in the Championship next season among teams without parachute payments. Relegation will put a dent in their revenue, no doubt, but they'll still have the highest revenue and the highest average attendances following Derby's promotion in League One next season. Relegation also provides the opportunity for a hard reset, if Knighthead get things right, to create even more of a feel-good factor around St Andrews, discover that winning feeling once again, and blood young players that might not have got those opportunities had Birmingham been in the Championship. One of the few positives for Birmingham in recent years has been their academy output, with the Bellingham brothers, most notably Jude, Jordan James, Damari Gray, and, if you go back a little bit further than that, Jack Butland and Nathan Redmond. Knighthead have signalled their intention to invest heavily in Birmingham's youth ranks, and with such a populous catchment area and PSR headaches to contend with, that makes total sense. The biggest positive of all, though, I would argue, is that Knighthead appear to have learnt from their Eustace and Rooney mistake, conceding that they got the timing, if nothing else, horribly wrong. New owners will make mistakes. Even if that one was a real howler, that is to be expected. It's the failure to learn from them, admit that they were wrong, and the sheer stubbornness that tends to end in disaster. Tony Mowbray, very sadly, is too ill to return to the role this summer, and I'm sure that everyone wishes him well, which means that Birmingham are looking for a replacement at the time of this recording. So it is for all of those reasons that Birmingham City fans, strange as it may seem to everyone else, are as positive as they have been in decades, despite just being relegated to the lowest level that they have ever competed at. In some ways, it's not that dissimilar to the situation at my own club, Hull City, where the new owners enjoy immense goodwill from supporters, just by virtue of the absolute dirge which preceded them, and favourable comparisons to them, and the fact that they have quite good PR. Birmingham's owners, essentially, are very typical American owners. They are an asset management firm headed by a slightly cringy bald man in a suit, accompanied by a token famous face, who want to build a multi-purpose venue and sports and entertainment quarter to generate revenue because their investment, at the end of the day, is just that. That's not me disparaging Birmingham's very popular owners per se, or other clubs with relatively decent and engaged American owners, as those club supporters often perceive me as doing. It is just the reality of the situation, and in the wild west of English football, where local wealthy person done good ownership is now rare, and fan ownership is presented as some kind of utopian pipe dream, it might be as good as it gets. It's certainly a lot better than being owned by a web of mysterious East Asian businessmen, about whom no one knows anything, a bunch of equally unknown investment firms based in the Cayman Islands or the British Virgin Islands, and a man who is quite literally behind bars for money laundering. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. I hope that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and of course, it goes without saying, make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, not just for this channel, but also my second channel, Alfie Potsama, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now. And you can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so. And all of those links plus a whole lot more should be down in the video description below. Cheers.